This is lesson 7.1 of our Pre-Calc 12 class. Unit 7 is called Trigonometry, and we are here. Lesson 1 is called Radians. In this lesson we're going to talk about the unit circle, what is it, what do we do with it, and what are radians. So up to this point in math, we've talked about trigonometry, primarily talking about sine, cosine, and tangent, and working with a right triangle to understand how to evaluate those three functions. The problem with the right triangle is that it only gives us a model for sine, cosine, and tangent of some angle measure theta when theta is greater than 0 degrees and less than 90 degrees. And that's because if I'm talking about theta as an angle of a triangle, angle of a triangle has to be a positive number, but it's got to be less than a right angle. So it's got to be greater than 0 and less than 90. So if I had an angle of 0, an angle of 0 would not really make sense as an angle measure of a triangle. And if I had an angle of 90 or greater, well, that would be, if this is 90 degrees right here, theta can't also be 90 degrees, because that would be two right angles, which doesn't make a triangle. Anything greater than 90 would just also not be a triangle. So using triangles, or right triangles, to understand trig is a good start, but it's very limiting. So for example, we can't use a right triangle to find sine of -5 degrees, and we can't use a right triangle for trig to find sine of 100 degrees, or cosine or tangent of those degrees either. So what we're going to do is, in this class, when we talk about trigonometry, we're going to move beyond the triangles, and we're going to, not really, triangles are still going to be there, but they're a little more incognito, and so we're going to focus our understanding less on the triangle and more on what is called the unit circle. So the unit circle is just a circle that's centered around the origin of a graph. So 0, 0 is the center, and the circle has a radius of 1. So if we go out to the right, this intersection point would be point 1, 0. If we go straight up, it'd be 0, 1. And we go to the left, we get -1, 0. And if we go straight down, this point right here would be 0, -1. So that's the unit circle. And so this is going to replace the right triangle when we understand our sine, cosine, and tangent functions. And as we will see in future lessons, this is going to be our basis of understanding those trig functions given any angle measure. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about, because we're talking about trigonometry with circles, we have to understand that circle trig has its own language for angle measures. Alright, and so instead of using degrees, we're going to use what's called radians. And to understand radians, you just think the circumference of the unit circle is 2 pi. The circumference of any circle is 2 times pi times radius, but the unit circle has a radius of 1, so 2 times pi times 1 is just 2 pi. So the line all the way across, like the length of this line is 2 pi. So 360 degrees would give us a full 2 pi. So 360 degrees would be 2 pi in radians, in other words. Or if we go 180 degrees, just the top half of the circle would be a length of pi. So 180 degrees is pi radians. Okay, 90 degrees would just be a quarter of the circle. And so a quarter of 2 pi would just be, well, pi over 2, half of a pi. So we say 90 degrees is equal to pi over 2 radians, or 1/2 pi radians. And we can keep going with that. We can cut that in half, so 1/8 of the circle would be 8 pi divided by, or 2 pi divided by 8, which is pi over 4. So 45 degrees, this red line, would be equal to pi over 4 radians. And then other useful ones to know are like cutting by thirds. So if I have 30 degrees, well, that would be 30 degrees goes into 186 times. So 30 degrees is 1/6 of a pi, or pi over 6. And 60 degrees is just double of 30 degrees. So if we double pi over 6, we get 2 pi over 6, which simplifies to pi over 3. So 30 degrees is pi over 6 radians, and 60 degrees is pi over 3 radians. And again, radians just kind of means the length of that part of the unit circle. And it's another way to measure angle measures instead of using degrees. So that's radians. We'll look at some more examples here. So if I have 135 degrees, I can think of that in terms of pi, and pi being the length of half a circle. 135 degrees is just 45 degrees plus 45 degrees plus 45 degrees. And so since 45 degrees is pi over 4, we have 1, 2, 3 pi over 4. So 135 degrees would be 3 pi over 4s. 270 degrees is 90 degrees 3 times. It's 3 halves of a circle. 90, 90, 90 is 270. And since 90 degrees is pi over 2, 270 degrees would be 1, 2, 3 pi over 2s. So 270 degrees is 3 pi over 2 radians. Alright, so quick formula for this. If I have a degree and I just want to quickly calculate it in terms of radians, I can think of half a circle, or a semicircle, is pi radians, or it's 180 degrees. So if I take my degrees, multiply it by pi, and divide it by 180, then I get my conversion to radians. Conversely, if I take radians and I multiply it by 180 and divide it by pi, then I get back to degrees. But right now we're going just one direction. One Direction. Alright, question. If I compared One Direction and BTS, it's basically the same boy band, just different cultures. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. Anyways, so 240 degrees, if I want to convert it to radians, I'm going to multiply it by pi and divide it by 180. I get 240 pi over 180. And so we're just going to simplify 240 over 180. Divide both by 10, I get 24 over 18. Divide both by 6, I get 4 over 3. So 240 degrees is 4 pi over 3. 60 degrees multiplied by pi divided by 180 to convert to radians. It's going to be 60 pi over 180. And 60 goes into 180 exactly 3 times. So I can reduce this to 1 pi over 3, or pi over 3. 135 degrees. Again, all of these multiplied by pi divided by 180. Simplify the fraction, and we get the radians. So that's kind of how that works. Some takeaways for this lesson. Using trig with the unit circle is much more robust and useful than using trig with a right triangle. And we can use a new way to measure angles. It's called radians. And you can think of it as the length of the section of the unit circle made by that angle measure. And then we know how to convert between degrees and to radians. So that's it for this lesson.